Hello everyone, welcome to Vitaisland, and I'm wearing my Vitaisland shirt for the occasion. Welcome to Vitaisland was a panel that took place last month. It was a virtual online convention that had been organised by people around the Long Island Retro Convention, and it took place, facilitated by Uplink, just a few weeks ago. I had been invited as a panelist, and as it turned out, it was a very small panel, just two people. The host, Sean, who is known under the name Jenovi, both on Twitter and for his YouTube channel, and myself as the guest. Now, the organisers recorded most of the panels and made the footage available, so I want to share it with you guys. Unfortunately, there's one minor drawback about this recording. Due to a most unfortunate technical glitch, the first part of our discussion was lost. While Sean and I were talking away merrily, nobody else could see anything. So this scintillating part of our chat is, I'm afraid, forever lost to Vita history. I know, very sad, especially since Sean and I hit it on all cylinders right out of the starting blocks. In that first part, we covered almost the complete Vita history of 9 years. So, yes, it is a bit frustrating, but we have the latter part of our panel talk available, and there might still be some topics in there that you may find interesting or entertaining. I hope so anyway. I'm putting it up for posterity. Long live Vitaisland. Please be sure to visit Sean's channel as well. He is a dedicated retro gamer and has some interesting topics he covers on his channel. I found him a most congenial host and we had a great time. I hope you will too. Welcome to Vitaisland. Yes, so I have no idea whether we were talking into a void previously or whether anybody was able to hear and see us. So we've already gone through an awful lot of Vita history and our own experience with the Vita.
Well, why don't we back up just slightly and for anybody who may have missed it, just start covering the visual novel discussion that you had started.
Yes.
From the top, yes. and then we can get back to where we were.
Yes, we started with the big games on the Vita, and of course right at the top is Persona 4 Golden, which in itself is practically a system seller for the Vita. And I sort of raised the question about Japanese games being always very strong on story. And we always get a lot of cutscenes and extensive dialogue scenes, often relationship building, which we know is hugely important in the Persona games. And that's a feature, that's the main feature of visual novels. So if you've played Persona, you've played something that has a very, very strong visual novel component. I don't think a lot of people realize that. So I'm just looking at it, so to speak, from the other end of the spectrum. So rather than saying Persona is an RPG full stop, I'm saying it's an RPG with very strong visual novel components. And once you're into that, you know, you transition very easily to other visual novels. And that brought us to another huge game for the Vita, and that's Danganronpa. And you were talking about the the initial development, and that was really interesting how they try. Yeah, if you want to just mention that again, I thought that was fascinating.
I actually don't even remember what I was saying on these, but
about how it was initially supposed to go on the PSP, but they literally couldn't fit it on because there was just so much. Yeah.
That was this game right here. That was Persona.
Sorry.
So Persona was originally intended for the PSP, and they would have had to cut it back. So this happened with Persona 3 as well. And I don't think that anybody really expected this to be a system seller. They expected it to move a couple 100,000 units at best, is my expectations, based on prior releases that the company had done. But this is actually a milestone right here, in my opinion, because this is the first time I actually picked up an RPG on a handheld system and felt like it was a full console experience. Not something watered down, not something from the SNES, but something that I could be playing on my PS4 at the time. It was incredible from top to bottom. Nothing felt like it was missing because nothing was missing. When I went back and I played through it on the PS2, this has more content right here. This was a game changer. And when you start getting into the Danganronpa series, these were put out on the PSP. I've never played them on the PSP. I don't know if there's anything missing or whatnot. But it's the same kind of deal to where what the Vita could do for these right here, and you're experiencing the visual novels and in the cinematic style, fully animated, fully voiced, and they just feel so fluid, and they just pull you in. Unlike, at least for me personally, unlike some more text heavy stuff that doesn't have those elements. So you have like these really polished, incredibly fluid stories being told through the Vita that you had never really seen excellent handheld prior to that.
As far as I'm aware, visual novels were not really on the landscape in the West before this. They were a totally niche component. People often had to import them from Japan and play them in Japanese, the fans. But to my mind, the Vita really spearheaded the visual novel revolution. I'd call it a revolution.
It really did.
Because
did.
They're now practically mainstream. And I look at the Switch and it's absolutely bursting at the seams with Japanese visual novels. It's just amazing. There's a lot that now go onto that system because it's the current generation of handheld. But it all happened first on the Vita. And I think when we look back on the Vita in years to come, that will be one of the very big points that we will note as an important change, when the Vita introduced change and how people view these types of games and then are prepared to play them. Whereas previously I used to hear a lot of visual novels, No, they're great. Yeah.
Oh, there's another really interesting facet of the Vita that I find, especially somebody who does a lot of research on older systems. And that is when you order through Nintendo, if you're a company ordering a physical run through Nintendo, their limits are extremely high. And so it's a big gamble. Can you actually get the games moved? And when you're ordering through Sony, they allow these very limited numbers. And that's how you have a company like Limited Run that was able to, put out these games with 2,000 or 2,500 print runs. So for a lot of these companies out of Japan that had these kind of like these unique ideas, and you realize that there probably wasn't much of a digital market, especially back when the Vita was first out. People like me were still reluctant about digital. I was really only buying physical for the most part. They were able to put these out onto the market, and you're able to pick them up. And if it wasn't for Sony, like really kind of embracing like this more independent, smaller print run type of stuff, you might not have this happen as well, because it allowed for these companies to kind of experiment and say, here's a game, and if we put it out with a limited run and it sells out, we can do another one, and it's not going to be a big deal. And if it doesn't sell out, we're not going to go bankrupt over the deal. But if we do this with Nintendo, there's a chance we could go bankrupt because the order limits are so high, and it's just too big of a gamble. So here's Sony. They put out a platform and allow these people to release physical media in a way that's not actually jeopardizing the long-term future of these companies. And I think that's critical as far as this media goes. And it's kind of unfortunate that Sony's exited the handheld market because of that.
Yes, it's the problem is so many factors all came together to doom the Vita. None of these individual elements would have spelt the demise of the Vita, but it all coming together and Sony then basically panicking. That's how I see it. It just, whereas nowadays it's just turned around so quickly, with the success of the Switch. And I think Sony misread the market, quite frankly. We have a lot of gamers now in an age group where they have families, they have family responsibilities. I hear it so often on Vita Island. People say, I can't sit in front of the TV at night and play a game on it. There's my family there. But I can sit there and play on my Switch or on my Vita. And yeah, it's not just young people playing games. They play games in all age groups, and you really need to take that into consideration. Yeah. So
I know a lot of older people who are retired, and you'd be surprised how many of them have a Switch and with Animal Crossing, or you turn them on to some other games that they might be interested in, like a Harvest Moon, or it could be a whole list of games. Just kind of depends on what their interests are, and they travel with these things when they go and they do road trips, or they're visiting family, or they're laying in bed at night with their husband or their wife, and they don't want to have the TV on, but they're not ready to go to bed yet, because it just allows them to sit in bed with their loved one and do something. And I think for a lot of the older generations, I think that the mobile devices are actually what kind of turned them on to gaming, because they got a mobile device, they downloaded Candy Crush back in like 2009, and that kind of pulled them in, and they started realizing that maybe there's something more there, and they wanted something more than just a simple phone game. And I think it's very uplifting that we actually see an older generation coming in and starting to actually embrace gaming, and not actually just seeing it as a younger deal. I'm about 40 years old myself, and I kind of come from a unique perspective where when I grew up, and my dad's in his 70s, he owned arcade machines, and we had a Miss Pac-Man machine in my house. So I grew up with Miss Pac-Man machine in my house, and we always had gaming, and a lot of these guys that I knew that were 30 and 40 years old back when I was 5, 6, and 7 all had arcade machines, and they gamed. And it's like, it was a little bit disappointing when I started getting older that these guys kind of got detached from that. And so when you start seeing them coming back in, and you have something like the Vita, which is super simple, like picking up a mobile device and playing, it really pulls those people back in. And I think that is about as positive as it can be for your mental health.
It's very interesting, the connection between what we call mobile games and proper consoles like the Vita and the Switch. Mobile games are very limited, as we know. That was the big mistake Sony made in those early days of the Vita. Smartphones were taking over the world. Everybody said, mobile gaming is it. You might as well shut up shop. Consoles are doomed. We heard it all. And where is all that now? Angry Birds came and flapped, and it flapped away. And, judging the mobile market was really difficult, and I think a lot of people misinterpreted it. And it was just that time, and I think Sony believed that, and they said, well, that's it, we're handing over, the mobile market has won, and the Vita can't do it. A few years later, the landscape is looking very different indeed. So that's really one of the points I would make about the fate of the Vita. Of course, Nintendo learned from all that. They looked back at their own history, they were the kings of handheld gaming. I've got several 3DSs. I love them. Not as much as the Vita, but I do love them. And they looked back at their experiment with the Wii U, which is considered a failed platform, but they learned so much from that. Yes, I know. I know. I'm a big, yes. Oh, we're handheld nerds, aren't we? Yeah. So, Yeah, that gamepad they had with a Wii U, that was sort of the first step of having a handheld component. Exactly, it looks the Switch doesn't look that different, does it? The Switch
No.
it just doesn't look like a Fisher Price toy, the Switch, and it was very basic. But they went from there, and they must have learned from what happened with the Vita. The thing that nobody could understand about the Vita is, where is my, just a second here, my OLED, is the mystery port at the top,
I got to look now because I don't know if I actually ever.
The mystery port that goes nowhere, and nobody knew what exactly they had intended to use it for. It's right next to the game cartridge.
I've never thought about this before. Fill us in, please. Because I've never. Yeah. I don't even know if I've ever opened this flap except for maybe by accident.
Yeah, and so many people have wondered and speculated, including me, but it's not entirely clear. And everybody says, why on earth didn't they put an HDMI out port on there? If they only had, but they didn't.
Yeah.
Sony were, as we know, terribly frightened. Piracy, etc. They stuck with those ridiculously expensive memory cards for several reasons. Yeah, and then no HDMI. You couldn't connect it to your TV. So they then came up with a solution, which was the PlayStation TV, which turned out not to be a solution at all. That was about as half-baked as you can imagine. I've got two of them, and I use them. They're very useful for my purposes. But for the general gaming public, this was a complete confusion, It really didn't make any sense. They had the building blocks there, the Vita, the PSTV, the connection with the PS4, which is excellent, you'd have to say. Remote play is a huge feature that a lot of people who come to Vita Island are really interested in. They had all the building blocks. They just didn't put them together. The mind boggles. I'm still boggled every time I think about it.
Yeah, you and me both. And, with the Vita TV, it was incredible, but missed the mark in so many ways, because when I got home from work on a game that I wanted to transfer over there, I had to pop out my memory card and then pop out the card and put them into the Vita TV. Well, that wasn't very convenient. It took some time. And that little device that has this flap, it's hard to open. But I would do it every time, and I always felt like there has to be a better way. And then you have a game like Tearaway, one of the greatest Vita games ever made, in my opinion. And it utilizes the touchscreen and it utilizes the touchpad on the back. That means it's unplayable on the Vita TV. And this is a reason to own the Vita right here. This is this isn't a game that they made to utilize the touch features. It's an incredible game that happens to utilize them. It's incredible. And so, it's a complete dropping of the ball in a lot of ways. I highly appreciate having the Vita TV because it's able to easily, well, I say easily, it took a little bit of work, but easily transferred over to my TV, as I was saying earlier. But I wish that there was a more simple solution. And Nintendo, I feel like Nintendo kind of like looked at all that and said, hey, there is a fantastic idea going on here, and we don't know why Sony continues to go with these half-baked ideas all the way back to the PSP, where you have to plug in these cords that aren't long enough, and nothing really works as you would hope it does. And it's like they have this idea of bringing it from the console easily onto the TV, but nothing they do makes it easy. It's maybe more about selling parts. Let me try to move this a little bit and see if I can cut that glare.
The design concept for the Switch is brilliant. But you can see that's taken years and years, and it took the technology to mature to be able to put all that together. But the time was right. Nintendo took that opportunity, they grasped it, and it's brilliant, and that's why it's successful. Yeah, so that's kind of sad for the Vita in a way, but we all knew, unfortunately, from about 2014 onwards, the first signals were appearing from Sony, and by 2015 it was entirely clear. Here in New Zealand, which is a very, very small domestic market, retailers were trying to get rid of Vitas and anything Vita related as fast as they could from late 2014 onwards. You couldn't buy a Vita hardly in 2015 anymore. Vita games disappeared as well. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but the one thing is what we can celebrate is that we still have this amazing device that is now technology that is 9 years old, but when you pick it up and play it, it doesn't feel like that. It still feels like it's really excellent technically. And one other thing I just want to go on about a little bit, because I'm a bit compromised. I'm handicapped with my hands, and I know a lot of people out there who've got issues from carpal tunnel to arthritis, you name it. And the Vita is by far the most ergonomic handheld I have ever had the pleasure of playing. I can play on the Vita for hours and I hardly notice it, whereas with other handhelds, after an hour or two, I'd get cramps or pains or whatever. I think everybody who's held a Vita will agree that it feels extremely comfortable in the hand. It's just a joy to play. Just needed to. It's obvious, but I needed to say it really.
It's true. It's something that I realized right away, right when I first held it in my hands. And the way that the buttons are set up are just ingenious, and they have little indentions on the back for your fingers to go, and it is comfortable for long periods of time, and it makes some of these longer games very enjoyable to play through for extremely long sittings. And that was definitely an issue with something like the 3DS, which was incredibly uncomfortable to hold. And I think you're just so spot on with that. Especially somebody who owns just a ton of handheld systems. I don't think there's probably ever been a more comfortable handheld system ever created. I think the Switch is incredibly uncomfortable to hold for long periods of time. I get just exhausted, and I not physically, but I just get tired of freaking holding the thing after about an hour. And I think when it's all said and done with the Switch, unless it just happens to just plug on with games for another 5 years, I might end up with maybe 50 games total in the library. In the Vita, I'll probably end up with, when it's all said and done, I've got everything I want, right about 200 games. And I think that just speaks as a testament to the quality of the library, that a lot of people don't realize that just how good that library is on the Vita versus, something that where people obviously realize there's an incredible library on the Switch, but in a lot of ways, as far as games that you're going to have in your collection for years to come, I just don't think it's just not as deep in many ways as what the Vita was able to do.
That's one preconception a lot of people have, that the Vita only covers like two genres, like Japanese RPGs and then a few little indie games. And that's just simply not true. There is an incredible variety, and some genre might not be as deeply represented. People always say, where are the shooters? Well, I personally don't play shooters, but they are there, and the Vita has one of the best shooters ever made. I think most people agree with that, and that is Killzone Mercenary. So, and to this day, you will find a community of people playing online, playing Killzone Mercenary on the Vita. The same applies to a Japanese action RPG called Freedom Wars, which was an early Vita exclusive and is an exclusive to this day. You can only get it on the Vita, and it's an absolutely amazing game. And that's very much built for online multiplayer, co-op, and to this day, people play it online. You can, get onto Vita Island and say, hey, anybody playing Freedom Wars, can we team up? And you will find someone. And that game is now, I don't know, at least 6-7 years old. Yeah. So there is a whole spread of genre represented. Tearaway is, Sean mentioned it earlier. I just want to come back to one issue about games like Tearaway, and you mentioned how it utilizes the touch screen, both front and back. It really relies totally on that. This was, as I see it, part of Sony's mission when they developed the Vita and got together a group of very early developers, and that's a history that is documented in the book I showed earlier, the PlayStation Vita. It's quite a thick book. That Sony was so keen on promoting the touch features that they pushed developers into utilizing them as much as possible. I think it was an attempt at trying to replicate and outdo smartphone mobile games. And we have a whole range of games that have the touch features from the early days, 2012, 13, they petered out in 2014. Even a game like Uncharted has touch control features in it. And to this day, I hear people on Vita Island saying, oh, that's the least favorite part for me in Uncharted. They don't like the touch controls that much. And I hear that a lot. Opinions are a bit divided on that. A game has to be as brilliant as Tearaway for the touch controls to work really well. There are a few games where they were implemented, but they feel more gimmicky, So the Vita got a bit of an early reputation for that as well. So I think Sony didn't judge that quite right either. There needs to be a balance. So it all contributed to the early problems, to the early issues that the Vita had and how it was perceived by the public. That's my opinion anyway.
No, I think you're spot on. And, it was kind of funny is when the Wii U released, it was kind of a similar deal. You have this big pad with the touchscreen on it, right? And a lot of times, the most unenjoyable parts of these games are these sections that feel like they're very shoehorned in to try to really take advantage of these unique abilities that these devices are offering. And like Star Fox on the Wii U, I thought it was okay, but a lot of people absolutely hated it because of the way it integrated a bunch of stuff just unnecessarily. And I think that happens more often than it should, and that's a little bit unfortunate. But when you have those features available, and you have something like Tearaway that comes in and actually is able to utilize them in an intelligent way, it can really elevate a game. But in the same way, when you're shoehorning them in, like you said, it's you can really kind of push a game down to being less desired than what it should have been, or at least elements of it.
I think the whole touch control thing was, in the end, a bit of a fad that died off. The Vita attracted what we'd call more hardcore, committed gamers, and the games that came from about 2014 on were mainly, they were all button controlled, regular, console games. The only game I can think of that is a fairly late entry that was mainly touch control is a small indie game called Sir Eats a Lot. And
never heard of that one.
I think you would enjoy playing that, Sean. It's very interesting. The implementation of the touch controls is not as smooth and competent as with Tearaway, but the game is a lot of fun and it's very lovable. I would definitely recommend it. But that's the last entry I can think of where people went against the trend. And it's a small German developer from my own hometown of Hamburg, so very nice people. They wanted to do this, and they did. It was their vision. But I can't think of any other entry later on in the Vita's life that said we're going to do mainly touch control. That had just died off. And if you talk to Vita Islanders, and I have talked with them a lot over the years, the one thing they all say they really don't care much about is the back touchpad. They said, Sony, you could have dropped it and I wouldn't have cared. And
yeah, I think it's probably... I mean, except for Tearaway, don't drop it. I enjoy Tearaway too much.
But even there, you know, they used the back touchpad not all the time. They used it very sparingly, only for certain functions.
I was going to say there were some rhythm games.
Yeah.
Such as this one that actually used the touch screen as part of the control mechanism. Yes. But you know, I don't have a real great memory for this is just the one I was thinking. I was trying to remember if Demo used it or not. I can't remember, but I do remember this one though as being one where I played and I was like, wow, that's like the first game I played in a long time to actually utilize the touchscreen for anything, and it just kind of stuck in my head. It was actually probably the first rhythm game I ever played, in all honesty, and then I started getting into rhythm games on the Vita because of this. So, but I don't know about any of the rest of them.
And there are a lot of really good music rhythm games on the Vita, and many of them are either exclusive or, if they're available on the bigger console like the PS3 or PS4, it just doesn't feel the same, because the rhythm game is really, to my mind, is, you know, first and foremost a handheld experience. Yeah.
I think they work really well on a handheld, and it's perfect to be able to pull it out if you're on a bus or a train, or you have 5 minutes to just kind of work through a song and